My 8-year-old grandson held up a small metal box he'd pulled from under his father's bed. I thought it was just a child's game until I opened it, and my hands started shaking. Because inside was proof that my own son wasn't just lying to me, he was planning something. And if Tommy hadn't been so good at hide and seek, I might not be here to tell you this. Grandma, look what I found. Tommy's voice wasn't just excited. It had that special kind of excitement kids get when they believe they've discovered something magical, something that adults don't know about yet. I turned from the kitchen sink, wiping my hands on my apron, already smiling. He stood there with his cheeks flushed and his eyes shining like two bright pennies. In his small hands was a metal box. Not a toy, not a lunchbox. A real one, cold, heavy, and scratched along the edges like it had been dragged across wood. And I don't know why, but the second I saw it, my smile faded. Because some things don't belong in children's hands. Some things are hidden for a reason. My name is Grace Miller. I'm 72 years old and I've been a grandmother most of my life in spirit, long before I got the official title. I've survived heartbreak, loss, bad knees, and lonely holidays. But nothing, prepared me for what my grandson pulled from under my son's bed that afternoon. And what was inside that box? It didn't just scare me. It rewrote everything I thought I knew about my own child. So before I continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all, and I love seeing how far this little community reaches. And if you're new here, subscribe to Never Too Old, because we tell stories that remind us life doesn't end at 60, sometimes that's when the truth finally begins. All right. Now back to the moment everything changed. It started like any other Tuesday. Tommy came over after school like he always did. His backpack hit the floor. His shoes flew off before he even reached the hallway. He ate his snack like he hadn't eaten in days, then started bouncing in his seat, restless like a little spring wound too tight. I'd learned over the years, when Tommy got like that, there was only one solution. Hide and seek. It was our ritual, our tradition, our little thing. At my age, chasing an 8-year-old around the house isn't exactly what the doctors recommend, but hearing him laugh, hearing that bright joy bounce off the walls, it made my old house feel young again. Ready or not, I called out from the kitchen, "Here I come." I counted out loud, like I always did, because Tommy insisted it wasn't fair if I didn't. 1, 2, 3. My eyes drifted across the window as I counted. The late afternoon sun was warm. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to trust without thinking. 7, 8, 9. I finished counting and turned, already picturing the usual hiding spots. Behind the living room curtains, empty. Under the dining room table, nothing but dust bunnies and an old crayon I'd probably been meaning to throw away for 2 years. The hallway closet, no sign of him. I laughed to myself, shaking my head. "Tommy Miller," I called, "you're getting too good at this game." No giggle, no footsteps, no little snicker behind a couch. For 5 years, I'd played this same routine with him. I knew every hiding place in this house, or at least I thought I did. Then I heard it. A soft thump. Not downstairs. Upstairs. And right after that, a sound that made my stomach tighten. Wood scraping against wood. Just faint, just enough to catch my attention. It came from one place. Sarum. My son. My only child. He'd been staying there more often lately, claiming his apartment lease was up, and he needed time. That's what always said, he always needed time. He needed time when he lost his job. He needed time when his marriage fell apart. He needed time when his bills piled up. And somehow, it was always my time he needed. Still, he was my son, and I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. I climbed the stairs slowly, one hand gripping the banister like it was a lifeline. The steps creaked under my weight, a sound I'd grown used to after 40 years in this house. Tommy, I called, trying to keep it playful. Are you up here, sweetheart? Silence. I reached the top and stopped outside's bedroom door. The door was slightly cracked, like it hadn't been closed all the way. My heart gave a small, strange flutter. Not fear exactly. Just a warning. I pushed the door open. His room looked the way it always did. The same twin bed against the wall. The same blue plaid comforter from his high school days. The dresser in the corner with old trophies on top, all coated in dust like no one had touched them in years. It was like the room was stuck in time. But Tommy wasn't visible. I stepped inside, scanning. Tommy! Then, from somewhere low and hidden, a whisper. Grandma Grace. Under the bed. I sighed, laughing. Oh my goodness, how did you fit under there? I bent down, my knees protesting in that familiar old way, and peered underneath. There he was, lying flat on his stomach like a little soldier. His sneakers were the only thing sticking out. His eyes were wide, proud. But he wasn't smiling. He was holding something, something he didn't bring into that room. Grandma, he whispered again like we were in church. Look what I found. He wiggled backward, crawling out with cobwebs in his hair, and held it up with both hands like it was treasure. A small metal box. My throat went dry. The lid was slightly open, just a hair, like someone had closed it in a rush. What do you have there, honey? I asked, forcing my voice to stay light. Tommy's face glowed. There's a secret hiding place. I was way back under the bed and I felt a loose board. When I pushed it, it moved, and this was underneath. He looked at me like I'd be proud. Do you think Daddy was playing pirates? He added, like buried treasure. I took the box from him slowly. It was heavier than I expected. And cold. The kind of cold metal gets when it's been sitting in darkness for a long time. Something in me wanted to laugh it off, to close it and tell Tommy it was probably just papers, to put it back and pretend it didn't exist. But the other part of me, the part that used to be a nurse, the part that could read a room like a heartbeat monitor, that part was already screaming. I sat on the edge of the bed, with the box resting on my lap. Tommy, I said softly, you did a very good job finding this, but I need you to go downstairs for a moment, okay? He blinked. Why? Because Grandma needs to look at it carefully, and I need you to do something important for me. His chest puffed up. Like what? Go to the kitchen and get your drawing paper, the dinosaur one, and start drawing your favorite one. That worked, it always worked. He nodded proudly and scampered out, leaving me alone in his old room with a box that suddenly felt like it was weighing down my whole body. The air in the room felt different now. Thicker. Like I couldn't quite take a full breath. I opened the lid. Just a little more. At first, all I saw were papers. Lots of papers, official looking. Then my eyes caught something that made my stomach drop so fast I felt dizzy. My name. Printed in bold letters. Grace Miller. My fingers went numb. I slid the top document out, unfolding it carefully like it might bite. A life insurance policy. Then another. Then another. I read the numbers and felt my throat tight. 150,000. 200,000. And another one, 50,000. I did the math without meaning to. $500,000. My hands started shaking so badly, I had to grip the edge of the bed to steady myself. I had never signed anything like this. Never agreed. Never even seen it. And yet, there it was. My name. My address. My birthday. And a signature at the bottom that looked like mine. But wasn't. The loops were too wide. The slant was wrong. Someone had practiced copying my signature and got close enough to fool a stranger. But not close enough to fool me. I stared at the beneficiary line. Miller. My son. I heard my own heartbeat in my ears. Loud. Vast. Unfriendly. I swallowed hard and kept digging. Under the insurance papers were more forms. This time, the words at the top made my vision blur. Adoption agency intake forms. My mouth fell open. Tommy's name was on them. His date of birth. His school. His details. And next to them, the name of the person planning to place him. My hands shook harder. My grandson wasn't treasure too. He was something to get rid of. I kept flipping, desperate to understand what I was seeing, desperate to find a reasonable explanation. But there wasn't one. And then I saw them. At the bottom of the box. 3 small pill bottles. No labels. No pharmacy stickers. No markings at all. Just plain plastic bottles filled with white pills. They looked familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. Like the pills I took every morning. Calcium. Blood pressure. Vitamins. Except these were unmarked. Hidden. Secret. My chest tightened. A terrible thought crept in, slow and heavy. For months, I'd been feeling weaker. More confused. Nauseous. I blamed it on age. On stress. On just getting older. But sitting there, holding those bottles, staring at forged signatures and adoption forms, I couldn't pretend anymore. I whispered, barely able to form the words. Tommy, when was the last time you saw your daddy? Tommy's voice floated up from downstairs, cheerful and innocent, like the world was still safe. A few days ago, he said you were sleeping, so we had to be really quiet. My stomach turned. We played a secret game, he added. I closed my eyes. A secret game, I repeated, my voice shaking. Yeah, Tommy called. He said it was a surprise for you. He went in the kitchen and I had to be the lookout. I sat frozen on bed, with that metal box open on my lap. In that moment, I realized something that made me feel colder than winter. My son hadn't just been hiding papers. He'd been hiding a plan. And my innocent grandson, my sweet little Tommy, had stumbled into it just by being good at hide-and-seek. I looked down at the unmarked pills again. Then at the forged signature. Then at Tommy's name on adoption forms. And I understood the truth so clearly, it felt like a light turning on inside my skull. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is someone you trust completely. And I knew right then I had to be smarter than. Because if I was, Tommy and I might not get another Tuesday. I sat on the edge of bed for a long time, holding that metal box like it was a live wire. My mind kept trying to do what minds do when the truth is too ugly. It tried to explain it away. Maybe the insurance was old, maybe it was helping, maybe the adoption forms were blank for some reason I didn't understand, maybe those bottles were vitamins. Maybe. 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 But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my stomach wouldn't settle. And deep down, in that quiet place where denial doesn't work, I knew something I didn't want to know. None of this was an accident. I closed the box slowly, like if I moved too fast, the whole house would crack open. Then I tucked it under my arm and walked out of the room. Downstairs, Tommy was seated at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration as he drew a dinosaur with legs that were far too long. He looked up. Did you find treasure, Grandma? I forced a smile so hard my cheeks ached. Oh, sweetheart, I said, setting the box out of sight behind my bread box. You found the biggest treasure of all. His eyes widened. I did. I walked over and kissed the top of his head. You did, and I'm proud of you. He beamed, satisfied, and went back to his drawing. I turned my back to him so he wouldn't see my face. Because my face didn't know how to lie. Not yet. The rest of that afternoon moved like a bad dream. I made dinner. I helped Tommy with homework. I laughed at the right moments. I nodded when he told me facts about dinosaurs like they were world news. But inside I was counting. Counting time. Counting doors. Counting options. When Tommy finally fell asleep that night, the house went silent in a way that felt unnatural. Even the refrigerator hum sounded too loud. I sat at my kitchen table with the box in front of me and a cup of tea I didn't touch. The metal lid stared back at me like an eye. I opened it again. Insurance papers first. I read every page slowly, like maybe if I read them enough times, they would turn into something harmless. They didn't. Then the adoption forms. Tommy's name on official paperwork made my throat tight. I imagined him in some strange house with strange people. I imagined him asking for me. I imagined him waiting by a window for someone who wasn't coming. And then the pills. 3 bottles, plain and silent. I tipped one into my palm. White tablets. Same size. Same shape. Same chalky look. They could have been mine. That was the point, wasn't it? I sat there and thought back over the last 6 months. The mornings I felt dizzy and blamed it on not sleeping well. The days I forgot little things, names, appointments where I left my keys, and laughed it off as senior moments. The nausea that came and went. The weakness in my legs that made me grip the banister harder. And worst of all, that strange fog in my head. Like my thoughts were trying to swim through syrup. I'd told myself it was age. I'd told myself it was grief. I'd told myself it was normal. But what if it was? What if it was help? Help I never asked for. Help I never agreed to. Help that had been slipping into my life quietly, one pill at a time. I looked over at my pill organizer on the counter. 7 little compartments, labeled by day. Neat. Trustworthy. Routine. I walked over and opened Tuesday's slot. 3 pills stared back at me. I didn't even have to think anymore. I dumped them into my palm and compared them to the ones from Spottle. Identical. That's what made it terrifying. Because if you can't tell the difference, then you can't protect yourself. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, trying not to panic. Then something old and steady woke up inside me. The nurse in me. The woman who had spent decades watching people smile and lie, and hide sickness behind polite faces. The woman who had learned that if something feels wrong, you don't wait for permission to act. You act first. And you deal with feelings later. I went to the bathroom cabinet and grabbed my actual calcium bottle. I poured 2 tablets into my hand. Then I went back to the table and lined everything up like evidence. Real calcium. Mystery pills. My organizer pills. I needed proof. Not feelings. Not suspicion. Proof. But I also knew something else. If I went to the hospital and asked them to test pills, questions would come fast. Doctors. Reports. Police. And if caught even a whisper of what I'd found, I didn't know what he would do. Because once someone is capable of forging your name, once someone is capable of planning to get rid of a child, once someone is capable of hiding unmarked pills, you stop assuming there's a line they won't cross. I sat down at my laptop. The glow of the screen made the kitchen feel colder. My fingers hesitated above the keys. Then I typed, "Home drug testing kit." The results flooded the screen. Kits for everything. Kits for substances I didn't want to think about. Kits for poisons. For toxins. For things that shouldn't be in anyone's body. My hands shook as I clicked through them. And then I found one that made my heart thud painfully. A broad-spectrum identification kit. Not perfect. Not hospital grade. But enough to tell me if something dangerous was in those pills. I hit order. Next day delivery. Thursday morning. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. Then I did something that felt strange, almost rebellious. I walked to the counter, picked up my pill organizer, and dumped the entire thing into the trash. All the pills. Every day. Every compartment. Gone. My throat tightened as I watched them land in the bin. Because it wasn't just pills. It was the end of trusting my own routine. The end of believing that familiar things were safe. The end of believing that danger always looks like a stranger. I turned the trash can lid down hard. And in the silence that followed, I whispered to myself. Not anymore. A sound behind me made me flinch so hard I nearly dropped the box. Grandma. Tommy stood in the doorway in his pajamas, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. His hair stuck up like he'd been in a windstorm. His eyes were sleepy but worried. You're still up, he said softly. I forced my shoulders to relax. Oh, sweetheart, I said quickly, closing the laptop and sliding the metal box out of sight. I just couldn't sleep. He padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. I had a bad dream, he mumbled. My heart clenched. You did. He nodded. About pirates. Of course. His little mind was trying to understand what it found without understanding what it meant. What happened? I asked gently. He climbed into my lap like he'd done 1,000 times, warm and heavy and safe. The pirate was stealing from the grandma, he whispered, and the little boy found where the pirate hid stuff. I swallowed hard. And then what? I asked. Tommy yawned, eyes half closed. The grandma was smart, he said. She caught him. His small voice softened like a promise. She made everything okay. I hugged him a little than usual, breathing him in like oxygen. I'm going to make everything okay, I whispered into his hair. Tommy didn't hear me. He was already drifting back to sleep. But I heard myself. And for the first time in months, my fear started turning into something else. Something sharper. Something steadier. A plan. Because if thought I was just a weak old woman. If he thought I would fade quietly into the background. He was about to learn something. He was about to learn that grandmothers don't just bake cookies. Sometimes. We go to war. I didn't sleep after I carried Tommy back to bed. I tried. I lay in my room with the lights off, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slow and lazy, like nothing in the world was wrong. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that metal box. My name on papers I never signed. Tommy's name on forms that didn't belong in anyone's hands but mine. And those 3 unmarked bottles sitting in the dark like quiet little threats. Around 3:00 a.m., I gave up and got back out of bed. The house felt different when the lights were off. It didn't feel like my home. It felt like a stage where something had been happening behind my back. I padded downstairs in my slippers, turned on the kitchen light, and sat at the table with a notebook. If I was going to do this right, I needed to think clearly. Not like a frightened mother. Like a trained professional. Like someone who had handled emergencies before. First, protect Tommy. Second, protect myself. Third, gather evidence. Fourth, act fast but not reckless. I wrote those words out and stared at them until my hands stopped trembling. Then I made a decision. Until I knew what was in those pills, I wouldn't take anything from my cabinet. Not my vitamins. Not my blood pressure medication. Nothing. It scared me, because I knew stopping my meds suddenly wasn't ideal. But taking the wrong thing, that could be worse. For the next 2 days, I lived like a woman walking through fog with her eyes wide open. I cooked meals with one hand and kept the other near my phone. I checked the locks twice. I watched the driveway. I listened to the creak of every floorboard like it was a message. Tommy noticed, of course. Kids always do. "Grandma," he asked Wednesday afternoon, "are you mad at Daddy?" My stomach twisted. I kept my voice gentle. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" He shrugged. "You're acting tight, like your shoulders are up." I stared at him. 8 years old, and he could read me better than most adults. I forced a smile and tapped his nose. "My shoulders are old, that's all." He giggled and ran off to play. But the question stayed with me. Was I mad? No. Mad was too small a word. I was waking up. And once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. Thursday morning arrived with a knock that made my whole body jolt. I'd been awake since 5, packing the kitchen with my coffee going cold on the counter. When I saw the delivery truck pull up, my heart hammered like I was about to open a door to my own fate. I signed for the package with shaking hands. The box wasn't big. It looked harmless. That was almost funny. How something so small could hold so much weight. I waited until Tommy was upstairs watching cartoons before I opened it. I spread the contents across my kitchen table like I was preparing for surgery. Test strips. Reagents. Small vials. An instruction book with tiny print that made me squint. But the steps were simple. Test a known pill first. Then test the unknown. Compare results. Document everything. I started with my real calcium tablets from the cabinet. I crushed one gently with the back of a spoon like the instructions said, added the solution, dipped the strip, and waited. The strip turned pale yellow. The chart said that was normal. Relief loosened something in my chest. At least that part was what it claimed to be. Then I took one pill from an unmarked bottle. I held it between my fingers and stared at it. It looked so ordinary. So innocent. That's what made my stomach churn. This tiny thing could be the difference between me waking up tomorrow or not. I crushed it carefully. Added the solution. Dipped the strip. And waited. At first, nothing happened. Then the color started to spread. Not yellow. Not pale. Not normal. It turned deep purple. So purple it looked almost black in certain light. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed the chart, my eyes skimming, desperate, hoping there was another meaning. But there was. Purple. Digitalis. A heart medication. In the right dose, it helps people. In the wrong dose, it shuts a heart down. Slowly or suddenly. Quietly. Like nature. Like age. Like she just went in her sleep. My hand went to my chest, as if my body suddenly remembered how fragile it was. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the roar of blood in my ears. Then it hit me like a wave. The weakness. The nausea. The confusion. All of it. Not age. Not stress. Not grief. A slow poisoning. Carefully measured. Quietly delivered. By my son. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair, my legs trembling. I wasn't a dramatic woman. I didn't faint. I didn't scream. But I felt something inside me crack open. A truth I couldn't unsee. Hadn't just planned for my money. He'd planned for my ending. And the worst part. If Tommy hadn't found that box. If my sweet boy hadn't wanted to win a game. I might have been gone before anyone ever asked a question. I stared at the purple strip for a long time. Then I did what nurses do. I moved. I grabbed my phone and took photos of everything. The strip. The pills. The box. The insurance policies. The adoption forms. I made copies and hid them in different places. Because if was capable of this, then I couldn't assume my home was safe. Or that my evidence would stay safe. I slid the purple strip into a small plastic bag and tucked it into my purse like it was a tiny weapon. Then I heard small feet on the stairs. Panic shot through me. I swept the testing kit into the box and shoved it behind my winter coats in the closet. The heart in my chest was still pounding when Tommy bounced into the kitchen. "Morning, Grandma Grace," he chirped. "Can we have pancakes?" I looked at him and felt tears sting my eyes. He didn't know. He had no idea. And I wasn't going to let him know, not yet. I smiled, keeping my voice steady with every ounce of strength I had. "Of course, sweetheart, go wash your hands." While he was in the bathroom, I leaned on the counter and took one deep breath. Then another. Then I started making pancakes like the world hadn't changed. Tommy sat at the table chatting about dinosaurs and syrup and school projects, while I watched him like I was memorizing him. His gap-toothed grin. The way he cut his pancakes into perfect squares. The way he hummed to himself when he was happy. That boy deserved safety. He deserved love. He deserved a home where hide-and-seek didn't lead to police calls. And that's when I decided something. I wasn't going to be scared. Not the way expected. I was going to be strategic. Because now I had the truth. And truth, when you handle it right, is stronger than fear. After Tommy left for school, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to someone I trusted more than most people. Detective Karen Brooks. We met years ago when her daughter had a nasty fall, and I'd been the nurse in the ER that night. She remembered me. And I remembered her. The second call was to a lawyer. Someone who knew elder abuse laws and fraud. The third call was to an old friend from my nursing days, who now worked in a lab. Because a home test was one thing. A professional lab result. That was a nail in the coffin of lies. By noon, my hands were steady. My plan was forming. And for the first time since Tommy pulled that box from under the bed, I didn't feel helpless. I felt dangerous. By the time Tommy's school bus dropped him off that afternoon, my plan was already in motion. Not the full plan, not yet. But the first domino had been set up. Detective Brooks didn't sound shocked when I told her everything. That should frighten me, but it didn't. Instead, it told me something important. She'd heard stories like mine before. And she believed me. "I'm coming by tomorrow," she said, her voice calm and firm. "Do not confront him again until we have a safe approach." I promised her I wouldn't. Then I hung up and stared at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. Because I knew something she didn't. Or maybe she did, but she hadn't said it out loud. Once you expose a person you don't just reveal their secret. You corner them. And cornered people do reckless things. That night, after Tommy went to bed, I didn't sit in my chair and cry like a normal mother might. I sat at my kitchen table, like a woman preparing for battle. I gathered everything. The photos of the forged insurance policies. The adoption forms. The purple test strip sealed in plastic. The unmarked bottles. I labeled them, I documented dates, I wrote down the symptoms I'd been having for months. Nausea. Weakness. Confusion. Shortness of breath. Every detail. Because I'd learned something in nursing. If you want people to take you seriously, you don't show them emotion. You show them proof. Then I made a copy of everything. And I hid those copies in places would never think to look. One envelope went inside an old cookbook on the highest shelf. Another went inside a sewing kit in the basement. And one, my "if something happens to me" envelope, went into Mrs. Johnson's hands next door. I didn't tell her everything. Just enough. If I call you and say the words "Blue Comforter," I said quietly, you call Detective Brooks immediately. Mrs. Johnson didn't ask questions. She just nodded like she understood something dark had entered our street. Then I sat back down and stared at its number on my phone. I had one more step. The trap. Detective Brooks would hated the idea. But it was the only way to force to reveal himself before he decided to do something worse. So I called him. From my landline. The number he'd recognize. He picked up on the third ring. "Mom," his voice sounded surprised, almost annoyed. "Is everything okay? You never called during the day." I put a tremble in my voice, not even faking much because fear was real, but I shaped it like a tool. "I'm not feeling well, honey," I said. "Could you come by tonight? I think I need to see a doctor and I don't want to scare Tommy." There was a pause. And in that pause, I heard what I needed to hear. Not worry. Not love. Not concern. Calculation. "What's wrong?" he asked, voice suddenly alert. "Just dizzy," I whispered, "short of breath, and I've been forgetting my pills." Another pause. Then he said it, soft and satisfied. "I'll be there at 8. Don't do anything until I get there." "Thank you," I said. "You're such a good son." The words tasted like ash. But they worked. At exactly 8 o'clock, Ski turned in my front door. I was already seated in the living room with a blanket over my legs, my hair slightly messy, my face pale from a little powder I'd put on to make myself look sick. I'd spent my life caring for patients. I knew how illness looked. And believed what he wanted to believe. "Mom," he called out, stepping inside. "In here," I replied, forcing a weak little wheeze. He walked in and for a moment, I saw him the way I used to. Tall. Lean. My boy. But then I saw his eyes. Sharp. Cold. Not the eyes of someone worried about his mother. The eyes of someone checking if the clock was finally running out. "You look terrible," he said, sitting across from me. I stared at him. And I realized something painful. He wasn't acting. He truly didn't care. "I feel terrible," I whispered. "And the strangest thing, I found 3 days' worth of pills still in my organizer. I must be forgetting more than I thought." His lips tightened for half a second, then he forced concern. "You have to stay on top of your meds, Mom." I nodded weakly, "I know." Then I let my voice steady, just slightly. "Have you taken out life insurance policies on me?" His expression changed, so fast it was almost impressive. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "I found papers," I said, watching him carefully. 3 policies, all in my name, all nomming you as beneficiary. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you find those?" That question told me everything. Not "I don't know what you mean." Not "that's impossible." Just "where?" Like the papers weren't shocking. Only my discovery was. "I also found adoption papers," I said quietly, "for Tommy." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand," he muttered. "You always think you do, but you don't." "Then explain it," I said, leaning forward, voice calm now. Explain why you were planning to send him away. His mask slipped again. You're making this bigger than it is, he said. I took a breath. Then I dropped the final stone. And explain the pills. He froze. The room went so still, I could hear the old clock ticking on the wall. What pills? He asked slowly. I held his gaze. Digitalis, I said softly. The kind that makes an old woman look like she's simply fatting, the kind that can shut things down. Stared at me. And in that moment, something in him broke. He laughed once, short and ugly. Then he said, with no shame at all, you were always too smart for your own good. My heart clenched so hard it hurt. I'd hoped somewhere deep inside that he'd deny it. That he'd panic. That he'd beg. But no. He admitted it like it was a business decision. Why? I whispered. He stood up, packing like a trapped animal. Because I'm 45 and I have nothing, he hissed. My wife left me, my business failed, I'm living in my childhood bedroom like a loser. And you, he pointed at me, you have everything, the house, the stability, the kid. I felt sick. So you decided to destroy me, I said, keeping my voice safe and steady. I decided to solve a problem, he snapped. You're old, you've had your life. Tommy would be better off with people who actually want him, and I could finally start over. He turned and looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Why not? I swallowed, my hands clenched under the blanket. Because you're not getting away with it, I said. His eyes flicked up. What? I tested the pills, I said quietly. I have proof, and I've already contacted the police. For the first time, real fear showed on his face. He stared like he couldn't believe an old woman had outplayed him. Then his breathing changed. Quick. Sharp. Fight or flight. And had always been a coward when consequences arrived. You stupid old woman, he whispered. He spun toward the door. I said, standing now, don't make this worse. But he didn't look back. He yanked his jacket off the hall hook. And right before he slammed the door, he threw one last sentence over his shoulder. Tell Tommy, his father said goodbye. Then he was gone. The engine roared. Tires squealed. And the sound faded into the night. I stood in the living room shaking, but not from weakness. From rage. From grief. From the shock of hearing my own child speak like a villain from a movie. Upstairs, Tommy slept peacefully. And I made myself a promise, right there on my living room rug. Would not touch that boy. Not ever again. 3 days passed. Detective Brooks collected the evidence, took my statement, put out alerts. But disappeared like smoke. Tommy kept asking where his dad was. I told him the safest truth I could manage. He had to go away for work. But on Sunday night, at 11:30, the phone rang. And something inside me knew. I picked it up. Hello. Mom's voice rasped. We need to talk. Ice flooded my veins. What do you want? I asked, forcing steadiness. I want you to call the detective tomorrow. Tell her you were confused, he said. Drop everything. And if I do? His voice lowered. Then things get worse, especially for Tommy. My grip tightened on the receiver. The threat was clear. And it wasn't empty. I hung up and called Detective Brooks immediately. And when she offered protective custody, an idea formed in my mind like fire. No, I said, he's desperate, he made a mistake calling me, let's end this. By midnight, we had a plan. And Monday afternoon, we set the trap. Miller Park. The place Tommy loved. The place chose because he thought it would scare me. But it didn't. It exposed him. At 2 o'clock sharp, I walked into the park carrying a manila envelope filled with copies, not the real evidence. Undercover officers were everywhere. Joggers, a mother with a stroller, an old man feeding birds. Sat on a bench near the playground, looking hollow-eyed and angry. "You came alone," he said. "You told me to," I replied. He held out his hand. "Give it." "Promise you'll leave Tommy alone," I said. He smirked. "Tommy's not my problem anymore." My stomach turned, but I kept my face calm. I handed him the envelope. He ripped it open. His expression changed from greedy to confused to furious. "These are blank," he spat. "And right then." "Police, hands up." Detective Brooks stepped forward with officers around her. Spun like an animal searching for an escape. There wasn't one. He was cuffed right there on the grass, near the swings. And as they read him his rights, he looked at me and hissed. "This isn't over." I leaned in just enough for him to hear. "Yes, it is," I said. "It's been over for a long time. I just finally stopped pretending." They took him away. And the park went back to normal like nothing happened. But I wasn't the same. Neither was Tommy. 3 months later, accepted a plea deal and vanished into the prison system for 12 years. He signed away his rights to Tommy like throwing away trash. And when Tommy asked me one quiet evening, "Grandma, is Daddy coming back?" I held his little hand and told him the truth he needed. "No, sweetheart." He nodded, then he said something that made me realize my grandson had been saving himself long before I understood it. "A little," he admitted, "but not really. He was never really here anyway." And that was the lesson. Sometimes, the person who breaks you isn't a stranger. It's someone you once held close. But here's what I learned, what I want every person listening to remember. Age doesn't make you weak. Love doesn't make you blind. And being family doesn't give anyone the right to hurt you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop protecting the person who never protected you and start protecting the people who still deserve you. So tell me in the comments, should I someday tell Tommy the full truth when he's older? Or was protecting his innocence the right choice? Either way, he and I found each other when we needed each other most. And every Tuesday afternoon, when we play hide and seek in this big old house, I still hear his voice echo through the halls. "Ready or not, here I come." And I smile. Because this time, it's safe.